Welcome back to another video in which I ramble about the House of Night series. I'm going to be talking about polyamory in the House of Night. Mostly how it doesn't really exist, or at least I don't think it exists as much as the author thinks it does. We'll get to it. So, I think the intention here, or the potential here, was that this is supposed to be a society in which women are, particularly women, are allowed to be sexually expressive and explorative and not experience shame for their sexuality or the ways in which they explore and experiment with it. And I think that conceptually, great. We need more of that in reality and in our stories. And I particularly think that's a good thing for books marketed at teens. We should be teaching teenagers not to be ashamed of their sexuality, the attractions they feel, their curiosities. Like, that's just a normal thing, and it should not be associated with shame or morality or anything like that. Now, what we actually got was... Hold on. Before I explain what we got and what it means, I'm going to go over all of the named high priestesses, and if they have more than one partner simultaneously, I will read that out as well. So I have my handy dandy notebook. So first we have our protagonist, of course, Zoe Redbird, and she starts the series dating Heath, but then while she's dating Heath, she starts dating Eric. And then later on in the series, while she's dating Heath and Eric, she also becomes involved with Lauren. And then because she's involved with Lauren, she breaks up with Eric and Heath. But then she starts kind of being involved with Stark. But while she's still involved with Stark, she gets back together with both Heath and Eric. Are you following? And then she is simultaneously with Stark and Heath. Her and Eric break up. And then she's with Stark and Aurochs, who is technically Heath. And then she's just with Stark. Now, notably, in the Otherworld series, Other Stark concludes that he can't be with Zoe because she already has a partner. If polyamory is truly just allowed in this world without shame, without judgment, why would it be an issue that Zoe already has a partner when she meets Other Stark? Why would it be an issue for her to have two partners when she is a high priestess and high priestesses are allowed to have multiple partners? Next, we have Neferet. Neferet mostly, this is original Neferet, Neferet mostly only has one partner at a time. The one instance in which she's involved with two men at the same time is when she's involved with Alexander and sleeps with Artis. But this is portrayed as evil, and we'll get to that. We can talk about Zoe's relationships in the context of cheating as well, but this is very explicitly presented as cheating and therefore evil. We have Shawnee. Shawnee is never with multiple partners as far as we're ever indicated. Then we have Stevie Ray. Stevie Ray does have multiple partners at one point. She is simultaneously seeing Dallas and Raphaim. And then we have Shaylin. We never know of Shaylin having multiple partners. Damien never has multiple partners. Damien notably is a high priest, and we're not given any indication if high priests are extended the same allowance of multiple partners as high priestesses, which that's a whole other conversation. Thanatos, we never hear of Thanatos having any partner. Other Anastasia doesn't have multiple partners. Other Neferet does have multiple partners. Notably, she is involved with Other Stark, Other Lauren, and numerous officers of her army simultaneously, and this is presented as evil and manipulative and slutty. Then just rapid fire, some random high priestesses that come up that we know nothing about. Gorgon, Aether, Calliope, we know nothing about them and whether or not they have partners. Queen Skyatch has one partner. She has multiple sworn warriors, but only one mate, which is notable. We do historically have Cleopatra, who is with Mark Antony and Caesar, except at least in the original House of Night series, I don't know if it's acknowledged in the spin-off books or the Nyx in the House of Night or the Fledgling Handbook or any of those, but in the text, it's not mentioned Cleopatra having multiple partners. I just know that historically, as far as I understand, Cleopatra was with both Caesar and Mark Antony. There's Alithia, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, no known partner. Pandaea is with Diana. Hippolytes has one partner. Cordelia unknown. Moraine unknown. Una unknown. Freya has one partner. Lilith unknown. Theodoro is with Drusus. Torcellia is unknown. Green Tara is unknown. Circes is with Odysseus. Hestia is unknown. Shekinah is unknown. The fact that we know so little about Shekinah is wild. And Duantia is unknown. So that's a whole bunch of high priestesses, and you'll note that the vast majority of them never have multiple partners. It's mostly just Zoe. I shouldn't have closed that. I should stay on that page. So I want to go back to when I mentioned people who do have multiple partners. So Zoe, I think it's really important that we acknowledge. So when other Neferet was involved with Alexander and Artis at the same time, that was evil because she was cheating. And that was like a sign of her villainous downfall in her backstory when we were getting those flashbacks. But Zoe is dating Keith and then cheats on him with Eric. And then she keeps seeing Eric and seeing Keith, even though neither of them agree to her having a second partner. And then she gets involved with Lauren, and there's a whole conversation to be had about, the grooming of it all. But from Zoe's own POV, she is aware that being involved with Lauren means she is cheating on her other two boyfriends. So per her own view on the situation, she's cheating. When Zoe is with Stark and Eric and Heath, she's cheating on all of them with each other. And that's why she and Eric break up, is Eric is mad at her for cheating on him. He's portrayed as antagonistic for it, and like a misogynist for being mad that his girlfriend is cheating on him again with two guys again. But she sure did do that. And then Zoe is seeing Stark and Heath, and there's lip service paid to the idea that they both agree that she can date the two of them at the same time, but it's basically like neither one of them want to not be dating her and are in fact tied to her through spiritual bonds that are nigh unbreakable. And therefore, breaking up is a pretty complicated thing. So I don't think that quite counts. And then with Stark and Aurochs, Zoe keeps telling Stark not to worry about Aurochs, but then she is involved with him. So she cheats on Stark, and then she's with just Stark. And when she's with just Stark, it's not even conceivable that she could have another partner. To the point that also in the Otherworld series, there's a moment where Zoe wants to she wants to go to the Otherworld because her brother in the Otherworld is in trouble. But Stark doesn't want her to go to the Otherworld because he knows that Heath is alive in the Otherworld, and he doesn't want Zoe seeing Heath. Which is like, okay, we were paid lip service to the idea that Stark and Heath agreed to share Zoe, but now in a reality where Zoe might see other Heath briefly while visiting an alternate reality, the idea that she might, I don't even know when in this mission he would conceive of her fooling around, since she thinks her brother is dying or at risk of dying. But in his mind, this is untenable, and he cannot stand the idea of her even seeing her ex-boyfriend in an alternate reality, which she will return from. So, it doesn't feel like polyamory is really this normal, accepted, common thing. And then with Stevie Ray, the whole Dallas and Rephiam thing feels very accidental and circumstantial. This is an ongoing thing in this series with both Zoe and Stevie Ray, especially in the early books, especially with Zoe, but they say they're almost dating someone, and they just won't commit to the idea that this is their boyfriend, even though this person is clearly thinks of themselves as her boyfriend, and it doesn't seem like there's been a conversation saying that they aren't actually dating. But there's they're sort of my boyfriend, or they're almost my boyfriend, and it's a little tiptoe around the idea of, well, you can't see other people because you're seeing this person. And so Stevie Ray's in that situation with Dallas, and then she doesn't intend to be involved with Rephiam. He's a half Birdman, but in nursing him to health and all the various things that happen with them, they accidentally end up imprinting because she feeds from him so she can have blood to heal when she gets badly injured. And all of this stuff is happening, and there are feelings involved, but there is no actual relationship really until one, Dallas and Stevie Ray are broken up, and two, Rephiam is given human form. And so that one is a weird in between. But also it's presented as when she does think about it, kind of sort of being involved with two guys, she does think of it kind of in the context of cheating, sort of. I'd have to double check the books, but I'm pretty sure she thinks of it as not an okay thing to do. Our only other example is other Neferet, which again, her having all of these partners is presented as part of her being really like manipulative and using her sexual wiles to control men, and she's like so slutty. And that's another huge thing with the idea of this book having polyamory. Like, one, not only is it just not shown, most high priestesses, we don't know of their partners, and the ones that we do know of their partners, they have a single partner. And so the idea of polyamory being this normal accepted thing just isn't shown. This is also true of like just women in general, prophetesses. Like, we don't see them with multiple partners, because there's some argument that like a prophetess occupies a similar role to a high priestess and so is extended certain similar privileges. Like, Aphrodite isn't a high priestess, but she's allowed to have an oath-sworn warrior. But Aphrodite also doesn't engage in polyamory. So, but on top of that, like the whole idea, when I talked about the intents or the potential here, the idea of this being about empowering women and presenting women as free to explore their sexuality how they will, and, you know, having women free of shame, that doesn't work in a context where there's slut shaming. This book has so much slut shaming. I will probably do a whole other video on it. But like, again, notably the whole thing with other Neferet being called, there's like a moment where she's speaking to the assembled officers and stuff, and she's wearing this like kind of revealing outfit, and other Aphrodite observing her describes her smile towards the officers as part honey, part whore, which, I mean, that's pretty heavily slut shaming her. And the whole idea of a powerful woman using her sex to control and manipulate men, and that's part of why she's so evil, just doesn't fit with what's supposed to be an empowering world with like free of sex shaming and that allows polyamory and all these things. Like, it just doesn't make sense together. Now, in terms of how this could be done better, one, I think it is really important to still have narratives about cheating, because polyamory and cheating are different things. But that's why Zoe and all her boyfriends are such a problem, is because every time someone does try to address to her the idea of like, hey, you're cheating on your partners and that's bad, she's like, well, but I'm a high priestess and I'm allowed to have a mate and a consort, so me being with Eric and Heath at the same time is fine, actually. And it's like, no, because they didn't agree to one of them be your mate and one of them be your consort. They both have to agree to that. You can't decide that that's what the arrangement is. That's not how relationships work. But that's never presented as a thing that needs to happen. And so what ends up happening is the story presents cheating as polyamory, which is not true and is in fact an extremely harmful way to present that. And so I wish there had been, like, I'd be fine if the early part of the series involved Zoe figuring out how polyamory works, and she does cross these lines and she does struggle with communication and she does cheat on her partners instead of actually having a polyamorous relationship. And then later in the series we move into her actually figuring out where she stands with polyamory and figuring out, and it's also fine if she decides she doesn't like polyamory and she just wants to be with Stark. That's also fine. But like, showing that journey to understanding how this works and figuring out if it's for her would be way better than it just being like hand waved as, well, I'm allowed to have both, because that's not how that works. And, you know, similarly, it's one thing for, you know, Neferet's villainous backstory to involve cheating and whatever, but like, where we have so few examples of actual polyamory in the series, basically the only examples we have are of cheating. And so sometimes it's evil if you're an evil character, and sometimes it's okay if you're Zoe. But I think what we needed was more, like, again, we can have Neferet cheat and that be part of her being evil, that's fine. But to make that work and not feel confused, we need to have more examples of actual polyamory in the story. And I think part of the reason why we don't see it is because the story is very fixated on an idea of like soulmates and one true loves and finding your person, to the point that like all of Zoe's partners are her soulmate in some way, except Lauren. Lenobia has a soulmate. I know there's more. Oh, this Damien and Jack are soulmates. Like, there's this whole thing with soulmates and the person that is for you and all this stuff. And so of course that feels uncomfortable when you try and pair it with polyamory, because, well, how can I be with multiple people if I found my person, right? And like, that's its own conversation, is the series idea of like, you know, soulmates and destiny and fate and soul bonds and all this stuff. For now, for this conversation, I think that it just would have been good to have a few even background examples of like, oh, here's, I don't know, Professor Nolan and her consort and mate. Also, this would give an opportunity to have more queer rep because you could have someone with partners of different genders and that'd be cool. And so, yeah, here's Professor Nolan's female consort and here's Professor Nolan's male mate and whatever. And it doesn't have to be a big deal, but just having it be there and have that be like a normal thing around the campus and around vampire society would have been great. And there just needed to generally be, I say this every time, more thought and care put into how this was developed, because I think it feels like PC Cast went, that's a cool idea. I don't like that women are shamed for having, multiple partners, even, serial monogamy, but men can sleep around all they want and not be shamed for it. And I think that's dumb. And so I'm going to write a world where women can sleep around and it's fine, and they can have multiple partners and it's fine. And that's a great idea. I love that. I think we should have books like that. But this book didn't do that. So yeah, I think this would tie more into, like, I can expand on some of these thoughts more when I get into a video about all of the sex shaming and body policing in the series. I do have an essay about that if you go over to my Medium. But for now, I think the main takeaway is if you're going to write a series that involves polyamory as part of its world building, you need to make a conscious effort to include polyamorous relationships in the story, and especially include healthy polyamorous relationships in the story. But I don't think PC Cass knew what polyamory was when she wrote this book. So it's not there. But those are all my thoughts for now. Maybe editing Rachel has popped in a few times with more thoughts. Maybe she'll add an addendum to the end of this. I don't know. But for now, those are my thoughts. Thank you for listening to me ramble. Again, check out my Medium that I mentioned. It's in the links below. My Patreon is also down there. If you like this video, leave some kind of heart emoji below because we're talking about relationships and love. And I will see you in my next video.